Hello, I'm Jo McCafferty, an architect and a director at Levitt Bernstein, and I'm absolutely delighted to welcome you to the Building Stories Talks today, the first of 2023, where we look at RIBA award-winning buildings and their experiences of the project architects and the architects running those projects, and to share stories behind those buildings. We can all learn so much from seeing the innovation and careful thought and hard work that goes into those projects, whatever the scale. So I'm sure we've got lots to learn today. It's the first lunchtime talk of 2023, as I say, and I'm delighted to start the series by welcoming two very special guests today. We have Clive England from Thomas Ford and Partners. Hi, Clive. And we have Ingrid Petit from Feilden Fowles. And they're both going to tell us the stories behind their really inspiring and impactful buildings. Please don't hesitate in terms of sending through questions, which we'll pick up in the Q&A along the way, kind of a bit later on. So yes, keep firing those through. Okay, so if we make a start, in terms of the St. John's Church in Hackney, this is a Grade 2 star listed neoclassical Georgian parish church in the heart of Hackney, and it has an extraordinary and large capacity of around 2,000 people. It was built in 1792 to replace Hackney's medieval parish church, of which St. Augustine's tower remains just at the edge of the churchyard. So now I'm going to hand over to Clive to continue the story. Over to you, Clive.
Thanks, Jo. Hi, I'm Clive England. I'm a director with Thomas Ford and Partners Architects, and I'm talking about quite a unique project, both in terms of the building and in terms of the way that it came about. So if we can just start. So this is the church as you see it today. And the byline to this talk is how do award-winning buildings come about? And I'll come back to that at the end, because of course when we set out on this we didn't know it would win an award. So like any great project, you have a building, and in this case a building with some considerable needs in terms of its suitability for its use. You have a client, and in this case it was the church team led by the rector, Al Gordon, and he was really at the heart of all this, a very inspiring and driven character with a very clear vision about what he wanted to achieve. And also somebody who was unfailingly positive throughout all of this. So he had a good team behind him, and that included his wife, who was also an architect. So we were well supported on that side as well. So part of this unique vision resulted in a unique team. So we collaborated with John Pawson, and that was quite an unusual situation for both of us, but it was something that worked out extremely well. We've built up a good working relationship. It was a genuine collaboration. So when I say we did this or we did that during the course of this talk, it's really speaking on behalf of the team, which didn't only include architects, but that's the main part of it. So we're an 18-strong practice. We specialise in conservation, heritage sites and ecclesiastical buildings. And we did win an RIBA National Award back in 2015 for a project at Sheffield Cathedral. And I think John Pawson probably needs no introduction at all. So we started off, this is the next part of the Any Good project. We had a brief, and this is a quote from Al Gordon's message to us about what he wanted to do. Of course, the church was already a place of worship, and it was already a centre for musical events, but it was managed to do both of them at that point quite badly due to the limitations of the building. So we were really tasked to create a better building for doing what it did already and for doing a great deal more in terms of outreach to the community. So this is the building as it existed at the start of the project, and that plan form was a result of a remodelling after a disastrous fire in the 1950s. You can see the main space is quite lopsided due to a hall being chopped off on the right-hand side and a large memorial chapel in the upper left, which had, amongst other things, pushed the main entrance doors off centre. A very uncomfortable arrangement. And this was how it looked internally. So very 1950s. I think it probably hadn't been decorated since 1955. And it was conceived just as a church, so it had gained functions along the way as the role of the church in the community had changed. So this was the plan form that came from. So I should say we worked with Stefan primarily and Chris at John Pawson's office. This was the plan that emerged, a very simple and symmetrical plan, restoring very much of the original layout of the church, but not quite. So there was at the eastern end there a much enlarged stage to support different styles of worship, and also its use as a concert venue. And at the western end, a permanent sound desk and bar and servery counters, which supported many of the other functions as well. And then to the either side of the worship area, two semicircular chapels. And a key part of the design, which you'll see later on, was the array of huge cupboards all around the edge of the space, which enabled the chairs to be cleared away. And then, just on the next slide, the Urswick Chapel, which is the pink space upper left, which I'll come back to, and also the south wing, which at the time that we started the project was something of a very badly used space. So this was the render that Pawson's produced at the start, showing this very austere and simple arrangement internally. And this is looking towards the baptism chapel, which is on the north side of the church. I should say I'm keeping this very simple, but I am going to focus in on some areas. Simplicity in terms of eventual appearance is generally speaking quite hard work in a live building. So we started out with an enabling works contract to repair the exterior, which included the roof, the rainwater goods and the stonework. And we also installed two large PV arrays on the east and west flat roofs. Externally, the other key work related to the doors. So on the left, that was one of the four side porticos, as the 1950s project had left it, a very ill-proportioned door. So part of our task was to recreate the original doors based on one surviving example. The reason that door on the left was truncated was because they'd run a staircase across it, and it was quite a struggle structurally to maintain that stair and reinstate the appearance of the door. Similarly, at the main entrance, there were problems with accessibility. So we inherited with a sort of key clamp ramp off to one side. And the upper plan is the expanded portico with 2 symmetrical ramps to either side. And that was simple in appearance, very challenging to actually get over the step at the main entrance, whilst remaining within the building regulations and also not altering the arrangement of the external steps. Here's another view, and on the right, that's the finished arrangement with one of the ramps, and a shot of the work in progress. Internally, we worked with what we had. So on the left is the rather sorry state of the 1950s staircase and internal draft lobby. We removed the draft lobby. That's the door you were looking at externally, by the way, with the reinstated door. And then as completed on the right. So we simply kept and refurbished the 1950s staircase, and it's grabbed up rather well, actually. And then on the opposite side of the entrance was what was the Urswick Chapel. And on the left, you can see the original door, upper left, and then at the centre, the new glass doors, which is such a feature of the new design. A lot more transparency and definitely a good deal more stylish. And the lower left was the blocked up door opening, converted to a window, and on the right, the reopened door opening. And that was critical. Jo mentioned this 2,000 capacity. They didn't have a 2,000 capacity before because of the lack of fire escape. So this was actually a critical functional requirement for the new project. And in the centre, not shown at its best, but it's the only photograph I have, Al Jordan was nothing if not visionary and persuasive. So he was able to persuade Es Devlin to produce I think her first art installation of this kind in the UK. And it's called Shared Sky, and basically the upper and lower screens project pictures of skies from around the world. Finally, in this section, the off-centre 1950s entrance doors on the left, and centre and right, the new glazed doors, which provide much more of a welcome into the building. And these were massive things and took a great deal of thinking about and detailing to get them to work as was intended. And this is a view looking out from the nave, and you can see how much better connected it is. And as I said before, how simple the interior is as well. But before we got to all that simplicity, there was the dirty business of the building work. So this is just a shot to prove that it wasn't all nice finishes and austerity. So it was quite a challenging project in constructional terms. One unwelcome surprise was the discovery partway into the project that the organ was causing structural issues to the balcony that it sat on. It was a late introduction into the building, and we had to do some strengthening into the gallery structure itself. The services were also a key part of the work and something we were all very focused on. This is a typical example of the services at the start of the project, scattered all over everywhere without any respect for the building. And we went to great lengths to conceal the new services. So this is one example where we had a series of large heating pipes running around a pier at the gallery level. And we ended up by chopping out the brickwork to recess the pipes into the wall. That's the central picture along with its supporting structure. And on the right, a photograph of the entirely invisible pipes as completed. It was also a very heavily serviced building. There are many, many kilometres of cabling in there serving a wide variety of functions, but you can't see any of them, at least not in the public areas. And on the right, the cupboards that I mentioned earlier were also used to conceal things such as the convector units up there at high level. So again, those are entirely invisible from within the building. This is a great demonstration of the simplicity and complexity. So on the left, the cupboards as completed, very simple, very stylish. On the right, this is a mock-up at the joinery manufacturer's workshop. These doors are enormously heavy. They're solid door panels and solid oak battens. And those are the specially fabricated hinges that enable them to function as smoothly as they do. This is the work nearing completion. So at the west end, the bars and the sound desk. This is a view down towards the baptism chapel again, identical to the render almost. Quite remarkable. And this is the stage. So upper right was the original concept for the stage, and the idea was that the central section would slide in and out when a musical event was on. That proved to be really problematic in terms of just engineering the movement of it and the fact that it would need to be mechanised. So eventually we came up with a semicircular set of steps which rotate on a central pivot through 180 degrees when not required. And lower right, you can see how that fits into the appearance of the stage front when it's not in use. The stage also conceals an enormous set of bass speakers, and the access stairs also pivot upwards on hydraulic rams to allow access for storage below the stage. And then moving on to the south wing, the pre-contract, on the left you can see the existing arrangement, which, as I said, was badly utilised and something of a death trap. On the right, we managed to squeeze in 5 doors of accommodation, very intensively used. This is how it looked beforehand. All those supporting functions that the building needs. This is the wing stripped out from bottom to roof, 5 stories high. And these are a couple of shots of the new rooms that were created. Very pleasant spaces, all working around the original fenestration. This is it. This is where we started. This was the concept. But buildings are all about use, what people can use them for and the purposes that they fulfill. And this is the church in use as a church. That's what it's for. And it's a job it does enormously well. It is the church in concert mode with Ed Sheeran. This is it on my last visit there just before Christmas. Very atmospheric space. So to answer the question, what does it take? I think it needs a building with challenges. It needs an inspired and supportive and positive client, a very clear brief, and a very good team. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Clive. That was incredibly insightful. What a fantastic project. I have to confess something. Clive knows this. I was on the national panel that came round this building for the RIBA, and it is everything that Clive describes in the flesh and has an incredible atmosphere, actually, Clive. I was lucky enough to both go when it was empty, but I've been since then in sort of operation mode. So it was just, it is extraordinary. Now we've got a whole raft of questions. So stand by, Clive, because I'm going to kind of fire them at you. But some of them actually incorporate some of the my thoughts. So I'm going to dive straight into a question from Sally. And she's wanting to know about sort of the cost limitations that you faced in the project and and how that informs some of the design decisions you made, which is also, there's a question from Bernard which talks about what was the cost of the project. And I know it was very modest, wasn't it? And you managed to spend it so well. So can you talk us through that?
Yes. Well, I don't know. I mean, some people wouldn't regard over £4 million as modest, but it was a very comprehensive project with a great deal in it. There is no simple answer to that question. I mean, we started off with a budget. We met challenges along the way. There were design developments. We did some value engineering. The church raised some additional funds. The HLF provided a lot of it and were generous with a top-up grant. Of course, it ran through the pandemic, so we were on site for the best part of 18 months. There were a lot of challenges, but it was really all about working as a team. And as I said, it was always positive, so there was never any sort of hand-wringing or finger-pointing or anything. Everybody really wanted to get the job done. And really, that's what got us through it.
Lots more questions coming through. Actually, one from John, who's just popped through about what your favourite event has been since that you've visited since the church has been in operation. Is there one that you can single out, Clive?
Not especially, no. I mean, they're all unique. I mean, I'm gradually getting over the fact of having been involved with the building process. To be able to go back to a space and not think, oh gosh, I remember when this went wrong, or remember that particular problem. But it does improve over time. So I'm going to keep going back there.
And Bonnie has come in here. This is all about back to teamwork and kind of working together. But she was sort of saying, at what point did the M&E consultant get involved? And also, I think she probably wants a kind of one-to-one with you, Clive, in terms of how to deal with the existing buildings. But she was asking, would that need to be included in the listed building consent itself? I'm sure that was all included. But do tell us about the M&E consultant.
Well, yes, they were involved right from the start. So, I mean, I was racing through this. There was a full design team. We had an M&E consultant, a structural engineer, a lighting designer, a sound engineer, you name it, we had it. So, yes, they were involved right from the start, and we all worked together. And it's something that I take a very keen interest in. Because it can make or break visually if you don't have it integrated, it just isn't going to work. So yes, I could have spent the whole time talking about the rest of the team. So apologies to any who were listening.
The simplicity of the interior space now is extraordinary, and obviously that's all down to that coordination with the MEP and structures. And interesting, you talked about the discoveries along the way, Clive, in terms of the organ and having to put extra structure into the gallery. We've got a question here from Francesca. She wanted to know about the accessibility of the stage.
Well, the stage is not accessible. It was something that we went round several times. And it sort of proved to be impossible to do for a variety of reasons. But there are always temporary arrangements if needed, so it isn't that it was forgotten about. I mean, I should say, just going back to the earlier thing, that the simplicity, of course, is a trademark of Pawson's work. So I'm not claiming all the credit for that. As I said at the start, that was their concept. And we worked together to bring it about.
One more question. It's quite rare, I think, that architects hear from other architects in terms of getting really good feedback. And here David is saying to you, Clive, truly inspiring. So I think you have to take that one away.
Thanks,
to see in the existing building being so invigorated. And he's talked about wondering whether English Heritage were sort of involved at the outset. It's Historic England now, isn't it? And yes. Were they supportive? Did they help you through the process?
The Church of England and a number of other denominations have a different system. They have their own internal system for dealing with matters that would normally require a secular listed building consent. It's just as rigorous, and Historic England are involved in an advisory capacity. So it was the same, but it was different. So yes, the diocesan authorities were supportive, as were Historic England, as were the HLF, as was everybody. I don't think anybody was against what was being done.
So at this point, I'm going to invite our second guest, Ingrid Petit, who's going to tell us about how Feilden Fowles completed the transformation of the Grade 1 listed medieval fratry at Carlisle Cathedral. Over to you, Ingrid.
Hi, thank you very much, Jo. I will just quickly start with a quick introduction to Feilden Fowles Architects. We're a team of 20 based in London, in South London, Waterloo, in our kind of self-built timber frame building based in a city farm. And we recently completed a visitor centre and gallery for the Yorkshire Sculpture Park, which was nominated for the Sterling Prize. And just this June, I completed a new dining hall for Cambridge College, Homerton College, which has been kind of a big achievement for the practice. Today I'm at the Railway Museum, which is the new project I'm working on, so I'm hoping it will stay quiet. So I will talk to you about the Fratry project, Carlisle Cathedral, which has been a very interesting project to work on and a very collaborative process. It's been a very long program of kind of 6 years, partly due to the significance of the building. We're on a scheduled monument site. The Fratry building is a Grade 1 listed building, and also because of the funding methods. So we also went through an HLF project. So it was quite a long process, which started by an invited competition and ended with a completion during the lockdowns of COVID. So quite a challenging program. Just starting with where the site is, I don't know if you know Carlisle Cathedral, but it's at the top here. And then we've got in red kind of our site, which includes the existing building, the Fratry building. It's a beautiful kind of red sandstone building with a wonderful south elevation, with big windows. But the north elevation, which is the one facing the cathedral, is totally different. Not many windows, and this quite dark porch, which was the main entrance to the hall. So there's kind of some interesting level changes, which we will look at in a minute. So yeah, that's it. When we arrived, there was this big tarmac road, basically dividing the Fratry from the cathedral. So in a way, you could walk past everything and not really realize the significance of the site you were crossing. There's this hall at the top floor of the existing building, which was unloved, which had a beautiful collection of 7th century books, but was basically never used by the public because of the accessibility issues. And then the undercroft was used as a cafe, but again wasn't fully accessible. There was a set of steps that were difficult to negotiate, and it was a quite tired space. So today I will try to go quite quickly, but I will have kind of structured the talk with starting with the brief, starting with the concept, the massing, the junction with the existing, then about the pavilion and its elevation, and finishing on the refurbishment of the existing. So firstly, the brief. So the key element to the brief was basically to bring access, inclusive access to the existing building, the Fratry. And that formed the kind of main element of the brief. And then from that, there was ancillaries aims like bringing kind of teaching and learning spaces, looking at the cafe, whether it should stay in the undercroft or whether it should come at landscape level, helping welcome and orientation, and improving the toilet facilities for the cathedral. So the main issues, as I've hinted earlier, was kind of the main entrance to the hall, which was through this very dark porch. And as you can see, there was a very difficult set of steps with a door placed kind of on a step. So it was a trip hazard, very difficult to negotiate. And what had happened is basically what we call the smirk doorway. had been reversed in the past and lowered to accommodate this new porch that was built by G Street, so built into the Victorian times. And to build the porch and for the porch to kind of sit under the corbelling, he basically decided to lower and reverse the doorway. So when we found it, you can see all the reliefs that used to be external were internal, and you can just about to see the relieving arch over the door that allowed us to reverse the door. But it was kind of funny because like on our first visit, that was our key thing. It would be great to like be able to reverse again this door, but we had no clue about how it could happen. Saying that, obviously, we had to do a lot of work into understanding the statement of significance for the building to make a case about where we could puncture new openings into the existing fabric. So I'm sure you're all very aware about what a statement of significance is. In red is like basically the fabric that is very ancient, shouldn't be touched. In orange is fabric that has been added over time and with a good case could be removed or altered. In blue is very modern fabric and therefore can be kind of chopped about. You can see here that we didn't have many opportunities for new openings, perhaps some blue openings towards the east, but again, there was a step of stairs that made that access difficult. So the porch again became a quite natural way to bring a new access in to both the hall and the undercroft. We were also very intrigued about the relationship between the Fratry and the cathedral. I've already mentioned about this tarmac road. So we went back to the historical maps of the site and realized that actually the cathedral was twice as long and basically formed a cloister with the Fratry. So the two buildings had very, very difficult relationship back in the days. You can see here an engraving that shows how kind of the buildings were linked together, and there was this quiet, contemplative cloister in between the cathedral and the Fratry. So we were quite keen that through this project we could improve the relationship and recreate a place to pause, because people would use this tarmac road as a big thoroughfare in the city and really never stop, never look, never realize the kind of importance of the buildings around. So we then started different massing exercise. So we had kind of obviously established that the puncture would be done where the current porch is, with a reversal and raising back the smirk doorway. And we first looked at massing that were against the north elevation, but created a lot of problems in terms of undermining the existing fabric. So then we naturally started rotating the massing 90 degrees, which helped us creating this kind of quieter cloister in between the Fratry and the cathedral. We then started looking at the heights of the building. So the precinct is all scheduled kind of site with several grade 1 listed buildings behind our site, the deanery and the prior's towers. So kind of the heights of the buildings were really important. That helped us to settle into a concept which is basically formed by one, this kind of landscaped area, two, this larger, taller volume, which create a new circulation space between the new build and the existing, and three, this low-lying single-story pavilion. In terms of the plan, very simple plan, although very difficult to crack because we had a lot of services such as a kitchen, toilets, and so on to fit in a plan whilst trying to achieve views towards the precinct. So we've got a big open space with a welcome and servery, which gives us the views towards the surrounding. In yellow is the circulation space, and then at the back, the kitchen with the toilets. So a very compact plan, quite tight. In terms of how it sits in relation to its surrounding, you can see here how we kind of reformed this landscape space. And there was a lot of discussion with the City Council about how the thoroughfare would still be seen, because whilst we wanted to encourage people to pause, we are not closing the key route through the precinct. So there was a lot of talk about the massing of the building and how far it extended to the north. In terms of the relation to the existing, so I've already talked about the reframing of the existing door. and kind of how we created this almost circulation tower with stairs centered with the door to create this new access. On the side of the stair is also a platform lift to have full access to the buildings. I won't talk too much about how we reverse the doors and kind of the difficulty in setting out a building that is basically set on points that are mainly internal to an existing buildings. I also won't talk too much about the discoveries we made, such as a Roman culvert, where we were making the opening to the undercroft, and the kind of importance of a collaborative contractor and a good design team to resolve those challenges. But yeah, we had an incredible stonemason on the project that managed to reverse the smirk doorway almost painlessly. It was an amazing kind of process to follow. I wished we had some students, like first-year students in architecture, because every block of stones, there was still the stonemason's marks or the pencil marks to help them carving the stones. And it was just an incredible kind of exercise of seeing all those blocks, numbering them before being able to rebuild the doorway. You can see it now being reversed and kind of stitched back in the existing stonework. So that's been kind of one of the incredible kind of interventions that has happened for the project. And you can see here the new staircase leading to the existing hall. And on the right is where the platform lift is. Here from the hall towards the cafe, the new pavilion. And again, you can see the relieving arch above the door. In terms of this linking structure, it's a highly glazed structure. We worked very closely with structural engineer about the structure for it and designed a diagrid ceiling, which is inspired of some stone reliefs that have been found in a pulpit space within the Fratry. In terms of the material used there, obviously we are abutting a very historical wall, so we wanted to find the right material to abut that will find a patina and kind of weather or age gracefully over time. So we're using bronze. It's a full bronze structure, which was constructed in Wales and created a beautiful moment on site where everyone, when it was delivered on site, came. So the plumber, the electrician, everyone came here to be at each column and trying to kind of slot the diagrid roof on. Is an amazing kind of illustration of how collaborative this project was. And there you can see kind of how this glaze structure forms the link between new and existing. In terms of the pavilion, was quite a simple form, so a low kind of rectangular single-story pavilion. There was a lot of challenges into trying to find the right elevation expression for it. So we worked first with kind of very rectilinear, very contemporary kind of expression, which was tested during local consultations very early on in the process. And at the time we were looking at perhaps precast concrete, which was not really well welcomed by the locals. Carlisle had a lot of building in the 60s that were concrete frame building, and they haven't really aged well. And obviously the precinct has got all this language of red sandstone, dropped arches, etc., which made us reconsider the elevation treatment. And we tried to inspire ourselves from the motifs found on site and kind of give a contemporary take to it by kind of inserting the motif of the drop arches into the rectilinear frame. You can see here how the remains of the cloister and the arches kind of mimic, or the pavilion mimics kind of the remaining of the cloisters. And again here completed kind of the two geometries side by side. As well as reconsidering the expression of the elevation, we also reconsidered the materials. So from precast concrete, we looked at stone, which led us to visiting a lot of quarries to understand the size of stone blocks we could have, as well as porosity of stone. We wanted to have the stone meeting the ground rather than having a granite base. We then started working into drawings, understanding each and every kind of block, how the blocks would be set kind of radially around the arch, which then led us to have the first prototypes on site. We chose a stone that is called local bricks, which is local to Carlisle and which has got those dark veins. And and again, the stonemason did an incredible job about setting all those veins radially from the arch. You can see here some of the final details. Again, I won't talk too much about it, but there was a lot of discussion about how this would weather and how it would be built. It is a self-supported arch, but it's only restrained back to the main structure of the building, which is a steel structure. You can see it here being installed and kind of the final product of it. And internally, we've used clay plaster to kind of mimic the kind of stone. Very briefly, I will just touch on the refurbishment of the existing. So I've shown a couple of photos of how we found the spaces. Here, basically, our intervention was as light as possible. We just wanted to declutter the spaces and bring it back to their original glory. Aside from that, there was also a lot of kind of MEP work, so AV, new lighting, new heating systems, etc. But we wanted to make that as discreet as possible. So you can see here the new main hall. There's new joinery to the left, which brings seating space, but also hides all the heating pipes to the side of the wall. New lighting, which is concealed behind the beam, and AV as well. So there's speakers and so on that you can't really see here. Similarly, in the undercroft, same. We were trying to basically open up the full undercroft. It had been previously built up, so we wanted to open up the full length of it. We've got new floor, new joinery seating, again hiding services, and just a space that is now used for education and rentable space. Quick summary, I suppose it's been amazing to kind of go back to the site and seeing it being used. It's been a very successful space for the cathedral. It's been nice to see it. It's been completed now since June 2020. So we're now starting to see the stone weathering in its context. So it's quite nice to see the building kind of starting to embed itself in its surrounding. And yeah, that's just a couple of photos. And then this is my last slide. Thank you very much.
Fantastic, Ingrid. Thank you so much. You have really lived that project, haven't you? Every moment and every millimeter. It's just wonderful to hear you. We have got a whole raft of questions. Actually, I'm going to bring mine first, if I may. Ingrid, I can't help it, and next time you're up, I'm coming with you, I think. But I just really want to know what your sort of ongoing relationship is with the project and how you've sort of seen the impact of the work and particularly the pavilion, but all the work that you've done and things that have surprised you in terms of how the building is being used now and how the movement pattern and how people approach it, how that's changed and been shaped by your work. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, of course. I guess firstly, the building opened on the 4th of July 2020. So if you remember, that was when the lockdown had started to be lifted, but we weren't allowed inside, only for takeout. So firstly, it was kind of incredible to see how the courtyard was used by the cafe. So we were able to serve takeouts from there and use the kind of landscape that was creating between the cathedral and the new pavilion very actively. And actually, because of kind of budget limitations, we didn't plant the cloisters as much as we would have liked to, which was a blessing in disguise in a way, because then it allowed the cathedral to kind of have a very big density of tables there and use this actively. So firstly, that's something I never kind of really expected to happen. Then when lockdown started lifting even further, we were then allowed to be in, but if you remember, there was social distancing. And the grid of the pavilion is 2.4 meters, which gives us about 1.5 meters between tables, which again was a happy kind of mistake that allowed us to have the same density of tables whilst maintaining social distancing. Beyond everything on COVID, I think the first year was quite a tough one because we weren't allowed maybe to have school groups as often as we were hoping, or concerts and so on. But over the last year, in my wildest dream, I would have never expected so many uses to be done in this space. So we had gigs, exhibitions, art exhibition, students exhibition, some afternoon tea in the main Fratry hall, some kind of clay works with family workshops in the undercroft. It's been so amazingly used. So that's been an amazing thing to see, and kind of I come back still every 3 months. I can't stop myself. And sometimes hearing locals, when they know that I've worked on it, telling me, I've never had kind of like old people that have lived in Carlisle for a long time. I've never known that there was this big hall here, because they were never allowed in, and they were like remembering just the undercroft, which was difficult to access. And it's been amazing to hear that. And the other anecdote that I really loved is a kind of couple of young locals. They were like, oh, you know, the cathedral, we're not religious. We never really wanted to go there. We never went to the Undercroft Cafe because kind of not into this. And actually, because of the pavilion being highly glazed, kind of made them realize that this is not a worship space. It's a space that is for the community, it's for everyone. And therefore, it kind of helped them coming through the threshold, knowing that it's just a cafe. So it was kind of nice to be able to help breaking down the image of kind of religious space and bring the community in.
That's wonderful that those boundaries, the sort of thresholds, have been dissolved through your project.
Yes.
It's been such a fantastic pairing of projects today, because it feels as though your project is a kind of cathedral of creativity too. Quickly diving in, so there's a question here from Abigail. So she's asking whether there were any contradictory opinions from existing members of the church or the staff about kind of bringing this building or this campus almost into the 21st century. Were there complexities in those discussions?
Yes, in a way we were helped that for the full story of the project, this project actually started 15 years ago. So I complain about, it's been a long project with 6 years, but the dean started with the idea 15 years ago and did the first proposal with another architect that was a conservation-led architect, which failed to get support from HLF, Historic England and Church of England. And when this project failed, the advice from both Historic England and Church of England was actually, you've looked at this wrongly. This is not a conservation project. It is about bringing a modern, kind of a contemporary tech to your precinct. So in a way that helped us, because when we came on board, people were like, okay, we're going to listen to you and be open to your ideas rather than wanting to go back to the tradition and kind of, usual ways of doing. And we were lucky that, to be honest, the client team, which was led by the dean, was really forward thinking. They were trusting us, they were trusting our opinions, but also they were never too narrow-minded. So we had incredible discussions with them.
Just a technical question from Jim Jeffrey, actually, who obviously is very, I think, probably involved in working on religious buildings. He's asking whether the Diocesan Advisory Committee were involved and sort of how they reacted. But it sort of sounds, that's, you probably answered that, I think, Ingrid, but just that in fact people were supportive because that was the direction of the project.
That, and I suppose I went very fast through kind of the process today, but I think we managed to bring people on our journey and on our narrative. So very early on, I think second meeting in, perhaps, we had Historic England and members of the Fabric Advisory Committee sitting at our client meetings. And we started very early on telling them, okay, we think we want to kind of like make the connections here. We had a lot of drawings, sketches, some models. So I think people over the years kind of, because they felt part of the process, perhaps didn't react too strongly or too negatively. Or if they did, because they were part of the conversation, we kind of like acted on that challenge kind of gradually, rather than like presenting after a year of design and being met with a negative response. So it was, again, I keep on saying collaboration, but it was truly a collaborative project.
Fantastic, Ingrid, super. Well, look, we have one more question, which I'm going to quickly ask from Sally. She's sort of asking about what was the process for removing the porch, considering it was of medium significance, sort of in terms of the planning process, Ingrid.
Yes, because G Street obviously is a very renowned architect. We had a heritage consultant on the project who kind of dug a little bit more about when was that porch built, what was the significance of it, etc. And we've been lucky that whilst it was designed by G.E. Street, it was built following his death. So it wasn't there whilst it was built. So that kind of like, in a way, helped us to minimize the significance of the porch. And then every time in planning, when you're proposing harm to historic fabric, you've got to balance it with benefit to the community. And I think our biggest argument there is like, if we don't remove the porch, we have to remove highly significant fabric. And if we don't do that, then we cannot bring access to a building. So I think that's through that we managed to get a kind of a very positive response. Even the Victorian Society, which obviously was consulted for the removal of the porch, kind of understood the reasons behind it. And as long as we recorded the porch, so there was extensive 3D scanning and recording of it, we were able to remove it.
Can you just tell us what's behind you? We're all intrigued.
Yes, so it's the trains. I don't know the name of the exact train, but I'm at the National Railway Museum in York. So this is the Great Hall. We're working on this project since 2020. We're doing a new entrance and new gallery, and I had meetings this morning, so I'm kind of, yeah.
No, it's just such a great backdrop to this conversation. Okay, so let's bring in Clive again, I think. What's so extraordinary, I'm sure everyone feels this, is your personal commitment, both of you, to these projects. You have really lived it all. And they're projects of a lifetime, clearly, but you've given them their all, and that's why they've won the awards that they have. I wonder whether, Clive, there are some reflections that you might have just in terms of sort of working on a project for that length of time, so closely with the rector, with such a vision. And obviously you sort of had to make adjustments along the way in terms of what you could afford to do, what you were able to do as you were uncovering the fabric and working with the rest of the consultant team. But just in terms of being there now and seeing that as forgetting the snagging and thinking about it as a building, are there things that you wanted to do that you couldn't, or things that you've seen that have surprised you in terms of how the building's used now?
Honestly, not. And I think that's a benefit of having had such a clear vision at the start. Sometimes clients don't have such a clear vision and things sort of develop a bit of a life of their own. And sometimes it's sort of partly what the architect thinks the client wants, and it may be or it may not be. But I think with this building and this project, it really came out as it was supposed to come out, and it's now doing what it's supposed to do. And it benefits from the job that it's supposed to do. It is now doing it, and you know, it's growing, so that all the community activities, everything that was envisaged is happening. You know, all the feedback I get is that it's really going from strength to strength. So, you know, that's the true test of any project. And you know, as Ingrid was saying about people realizing what's there and that it's something for them and they can visit it and enjoy it and be part of it. That's really what makes a project successful. You know, however nice it looks, it can't just look nice in a vacuum. It has to engage with people. Absolutely,
Clive. Just a couple of questions just have come in about timelines. Do you think could you both just in a very short sentence just remind everybody of the timelines of these projects? Ingrid, first to you, perhaps.
Yes, so competition was on May 2014. The same year we submitted HLF Stage 1. Year after we started on HLF Stage 2, but planning wasn't submitted with HLF Stage 2 until October 2016. So kind of a year and a bit of kind of RIBA Stage 3 and so on. We've started on site in 2018 towards the end of the year. So yeah, 2 years after HLF Stage 2 approval, and then finished on site in June 2020 as we were in COVID.
Fantastic, Ingrid. Thank you. Thank you. And Clive, just start and finish dates from you would be great.
Okay. Well, we had our first meeting as a team in December 2017. We were on site in December 2018, and we finished in April 2020.
Fantastic. Well, what journeys you've both been on, and just thank you so much for very honestly sharing everything today. I think it was incredibly insightful.